A rainy morning. A young woman in a wheelchair wearing a black nylon poncho spattered with rain is pushing herself through the morning. You have seen how pianists sometimes bend forward to strike the keys, then lift their hands, draw back to rest, then lean again to strike just as the chord fades. Such is the way this woman strikes at the wheels, then lifts her long white fingers, letting them float, then bends again to strike, just as the chair slows as if into a silence. So expertly she plays the chords of this difficult music she has mastered, her wet face beautiful in its concentration, while the wind turns the pages of rain. Memory. Spinning up dust and corn shucks as it crossed the chalky, exhausted fields, it sucked up into its heart hot work, cold work, lunch buckets, good horses, bad horses, their names and the names of mules that were better or worse than the horses, then rattled the dented tin sides of the threshing machine, shook the manure spreader, cranked the tractor's crank that broke the uncle's arm, then swept on through the windbreak, taking the tree house and dirty magazines, turning its fury on the barn where cows kicked over buckets and the gray cat sat for a squirt of thick milk in its whiskers, crossed the chicken pen, undid the hook, plucked a warm brown egg from the meanest hen, then turned toward the house where threshers were having dinner, peeled back the roof and the kitchen ceiling, reached down and snatched up uncles and cousins, grandma, grandpa, parents and children one by one, held them like dolls, looked long and longingly into their faces, then set them back in their chairs with blue and white platters of chicken and ham and mashed potatoes still steaming before them, with boats of gravy and bowls of peas and 3 kinds of pie, and suddenly, with a sound like a sigh, drew up its crowded, roaring, dusty funnel, and there at its tip was the nib of a pen. A glimpse of the eternal. Just now, a sparrow lighted on a pine bough right outside my bedroom window, and a puff of yellow pollen flew away. Four Civil War paintings by Winslow Homer. If the painter shows that he observes more than he reflects, we will forget the limitation and take his work as we take nature, which, if it does not think, is yet the cause of thought in us. Sharpshooter, a Union sniper in a tree. Some part of art is the art of waiting, the chord behind the tight fence of a musical staff. the sonnet shut in a book. This is a painting of waiting. The sharp crack of the rifle still coiled under the tiny percussion cap. The cap poised under the cocked curl of the hammer. And this young man among the pine needles, his finger as light as a breath on the trigger, just a pinpoint of light in his one open eye, like a star you might see in broad daylight if you thought to look up. The bright side. Black Union teamsters at rest against a yellow tent. Though they lie in the sun, the light does not glance from buckle or button, nor from their shadowy faces or hands. One faint highlight, like a twist of cotton on the bill of a cap. Instead, the sun seems to soak into their sweaty clothes and their skin, making them even more black than they were. In the bright side of their tent, they look like a ragged hole. They look like oily cannon rags or a heap of old harness. Beyond, mules graze on light, and canvas-topped wagons loom bright as sails, so airy you would think they were empty. Perhaps they are. Perhaps these 5 black men have taken on all of the load. The powder kegs, the bags of potatoes, the canisters of lead, so dark, so heavy is their sleep, with one man left awake to smoke his pipe and watch. Prisoners from the front. 3 Confederate soldiers awaiting their disposal by a Union general. The youngest captive wears full butternut regalia, is handsome with long red hair, his field cap cocked, one hand on his hip. A man not ready to be immortalized under yellowing varnish. An old man stands next in line, bearded and wearing a ragged brown coat. He slumps like the very meaning of surrender, but his jaw is set, and his eyes are like flashes from distant cannon. We have waited 140 years to hear those reports. The third is hot and young and ornery, wearing a floppy hat, brim up, his military coat unbuttoned, hands stuffed in his pockets, his mouth poised to spit. It would be he who would ruin the Union general's moment. His formal military portrait, that neat blue uniform, the cavalry saber, and fancy black hat. He would surely do something to spoil it if the painter would give him a chance. The veteran in a new field, a lone man scything wheat. His back is turned to us, his white shirt the brightest thing in the painting. Old trousers, leather army suspenders. Before him the red wheat bends. The sky is cloudless, smokeless, and blue. Where he has passed, the hot stalks spread in streaks, like a shell exploding. But that is behind him. With stiff, bony shoulders, he mows his way into the colors of summer. Old cemetery. Somebody has been here this morning to cut the grass, coming and going unseen but leaving tracks. Probably driving a pickup with a low mower trailer that bent down the weeds in the lane from the highway. Somebody paid by the job, not paid enough, and mean and peevish, too hurried to pull the bindweed that weaves up into filigreed iron crosses, or to trim the tall red prairie grass too close to the markers to mow without risking the blade. Careless and reckless, too, leaving green paint scraped from the deck of the mower on the cracked concrete base of a marker. The dead must have been overjoyed to have their world back to themselves, to hear the creak of trailer springs under the weight of the cooling motor, and to hear the pickup turn over and start at last and drive away. And then to hear the soft ticking of weeds springing back, undeterred, in the lane that leads nowhere the dead want to go. Dishwater. Slap of the screen door, flat knock of my grandmother's boxy black shoes on the wooden step, the hush and sweep of her knob-kneed, cotton-aproned stride out to the edge, and then, towed in with a furious twist and heave, a bridge that leaps from her hot red hands and hangs there, shining for 50 years, over the mystified chickens, over the swaying nettles, the ragweed, the clay slope down to the creek, over the red-winged blackbirds in the tops of the willows, a glorious rainbow with an empty dishpan swinging at one end. Tectonics. In only a few months there begin to be fissures in what we remember, and within a year or two the facts break apart one from another and slowly begin to shift and turn, grinding, pushing up over each other until their shapes have been changed and the past has become a new world. And after many years, even a love affair, one lush green island all to itself, perfectly detailed, with even a candle softly lighting a smile, may slide under the waves like Atlantis, scarcely rippling the heart.